For joining us today for the latest trends in real estate claims. I'm Laura Prouse with CRES Insurance, and today we welcome Mark Carlson from the Carlson Law Group. Mark has been defending real estate professionals since 1993 and has worked with CRES for over 25 years and is a founding member of our legal panel. We also welcome Dave Miller, VP of Sales with Fidelity National Home Warranty. Dave manages the CRES Advantage Home Warranty Plan, which ties into CRES's E&O insurance. We have a lot to cover, so Dave, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thanks for having us, Laura. Mark, it's always great to see you. I feel like it's been a while since we've kept the California real estate agents and professionals up to date on claims that's going on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we're a bit overdue for a new one.
We certainly are, and we've already finished the first quarter of 2025. Before we started recording, Laura had mentioned there's been a little bit of an uptick in claims, E&O claims so far this year. Obviously, in your law firm, you have claims that are coming across from CRES all the time. Are you seeing an uptick in claims, or are they about the same from last year?
We're seeing a little bit year over year in things that are sent to us. Keep in mind, right, that we don't see all of the claims. We see the litigated matters, and so sometimes claims can get resolved before they come to us. But typically the ratio is about the same. So I would say I would agree that so far this year it's been a bit more active than it was last year.
Okay. Now, Laura also mentioned that disclosure is always the highest category, if you will, of claims. But she mentioned permits and water intrusion are kind of hot topics right now. Can you talk to those two, and then maybe some other hot topics that you're seeing?
So disclosure is always the top, number one by a large margin. Things that were wrong with the property that the buyer didn't discover during the investigation, but then during escrow, but discovers after close of escrow. And that's been the same, my entire time defending real estate brokers. We have had a bit of an increase in water claims, but I think that is more of a product of the last couple of years where we've had just the unprecedented rains, and the properties that previously were able to fend off that amount of rain, or just things started to fail, and then once you start fixing one area, you discover other areas that previously had gone unnoticed, and so it isn't just a matter in a lot of these cases of just fixing a small leak. There's a lot of other water damage areas that need to be fixed, and that's what causes people to want to file lawsuits, because the damages get to be more than what they can cover out of their own pockets. And there have been some permit issues. There's been where there's not a lot of room to build. People have been remodeling, obviously not as much as they did in the 2016-17 era, where money was a bit cheaper. But there have been, we're still seeing conversions and forecasts. We'll get to this in a minute with ADUs and whatnot. So yeah, there have been a lot of claim or more claims relative to work being done without permits. We've also had some deposit disputes. That's really continues to be an item or a category of lawsuits and disputes that prior to COVID really wasn't that much of an issue. Now, we're seeing people that are stretching to get into properties, and they find out that their loan, when it funds, is a quarter point or an eighth point, whatever, higher than they thought, and that really pushes them over the edge to where they can't afford the property, so they want to back out, and then people are fighting over deposit disputes. Just when the loan market gets tough, that's when buyers are most likely to back out.
Now, on some of those permit issues, are we talking like maybe retaining walls that they didn't go to the city to get permitted, or is it square footage, maybe rooms that they've added to the back of the house? Or maybe they replaced an HVAC system and didn't get it permitted. What kind of categories within permits are you seeing?
Yeah, it's typically people doing remodeling work or doing upgrades without getting proper permits. Okay. We haven't seen a whole lot of issues where there's foundational problems that were repaired without permits. Although we get a few of those, but they're not as common as just we moved the bathrooms around or bedrooms around and changed the footprint, and then just didn't give the necessary permits.
And talking about permits, it made me think of flippers real quick. Obviously, in this market, it's a little bit harder for flippers to come in and have a successful business because the costs have gone up so much. Are we seeing fewer claims on houses that have been recently remodeled and flipped? Or what's your pulse there?
Yeah, those kind of claims are down, at least from what I'm seeing, an awful lot, from the pre-COVID, that time period right prior to COVID, or even during COVID, when money was really cheap and the market was on fire. We saw a lot of those claims done.
That's great. Now, we talked about ADUs, and you referenced it a second ago. We had some new rules that came out, new laws that came out in 2018 and 19, I think, regarding ADUs. And we've seen, obviously, an increase in the last 8 to 10 years with properties having ADUs on them. Why do we typically see claims 12 to 24 months after these new laws?
So it's been, you could say new laws, you could say change in economic conditions, you could say whatever change happens with the agents with boots on the ground. It takes about 12 to 24 months after those changes before we see an increase or see claims arising out of those changes. And I think that it's just the course of what leads to a lawsuit, right? Somebody gets into a property, they're fined for a few months, or they don't discover the issue for a few months. Then they spend another handful of months or whatever trying to resolve the issue, and then ultimately they can't resolve the issue, and then they decide, well, I have to do something to either get this paid for or get my money back or whatever the nature of the lawsuit may be, and then they file a lawsuit, and that just, for whatever reason, it's been that range has been the same for 20 years. You pick out any change in the market over the last 20 years, and I can demonstrate how on our side we didn't start seeing those claims till about a year to 2 years after those changes.
Interesting. And we were talking about ADUs and how you're seeing how sellers are using the rules to remedy illegal units and additions prior to selling. Explain to us what that means.
So let's say, just as an easy example, you have someone, on the small lot. Let's call it a 6,500, 7,000 square foot lot with a 1,800 square foot 2-bedroom home, and the garage at the back, to where you have to drive down the side on your driveway. I mean, we all have that picture of that house in our mind, right? Somebody has an aunt or an uncle who has owned those kind of houses. Everybody does. And so people need to add more space, or they want to have a rental unit or whatever, so they convert the garage into a dwelling unit illegally. And so previously, before there were the ADU laws, you just couldn't fix that issue. You had to have covered parking. So maybe you try to put a carport along the way, on the driveway. But for the most part, those kind of problems were just not solvable without major renovations or raising the house and putting in a duplex. But now with the ADU laws, I can apply to have that converted garage to be an ADU, and now what was previously an illegal structure as a dwelling unit now becomes a habitable structure. And you could have a number of, even a lot that's bigger, where somebody took a chicken coop and made it into a dwelling unit. We've had those kind of cases. I'm not making it up. And now you can use the ADU to change or to correct the illegality of that structure being a dwelling unit. In the city of San Francisco, there's just been a ton of those also, where you have units that previously just couldn't be legal, and now they're using these laws to be able to make things legal. So it's been a tremendous tool for sellers to say, all right, now I want to sell my property, and I'm going to make an illegal structure. I'm going to add that square footage. The value of my property goes up, and it's been a real trend over the last year or so.
When you're telling me that cities and counties have less ability to stop those folks from putting in ADUs because of the new laws?
Right, that's the idea behind the state's programs or state rules, is that it forces local building departments, planning departments to accept these ADUs irrespective of what their local ordinances are. Setbacks are smaller. Again, covered parking is essentially eliminated so long as you're within a certain radius of a bus stop, or other public transportation. And so, yeah, they don't have any discretion. They have to approve these projects.
Are there any differences if I'm going to be adding an ADU to my property, if it's for multi-gen, or if I'm going to be renting it out to somebody? Or is there anything that applies differently to me if it's one or the other?
Not in the construction. There could, of course, be some rent stabilization issues depending upon the area, but we would need another 2 hours to be able to, especially after COVID with all the tenant protections. It seems every city has their own version of tenant protection or rent stabilization ordinances.
That's crazy. Now we talk about how new administrations, market volatility, interest rates, those can all affect the housing market. And I think we're seeing that right now. But do those factors really factor into the increase or decrease of E&O claims? Do those tie in at all together?
Well, when the market does well, and property prices go up, significantly or even modestly, people tend to not
Yeah,
file lawsuits in those environments, right? They're still happy, they made money on their property, and so you really don't. They're less likely to be upset about being in the property in that kind of a economic environment. When the market turns, and now somebody is in a house that's worth less than what they paid for, that is usually when they get more inclined to. I would say that potentially the frequency of lawsuits goes up, whereas there's potentially fewer transactions, and that's always when you go back in time, you got to look at whether the number of deals that are happening, because those go up and down. We've had many years here without a lot of inventory, but then we saw, in the COVID time frame, which wasn't that long ago, where you still had low inventory, but there were just a lot of transactions happening. So it's and rates, of course, influence people's desire to get into properties. It's although maybe not the best economic decision. When you got your cousin Sal who's trying to predict what rates are going to be, and people listen to cousin Sal and they don't listen to the economists. The CAR chief economist, he has a funny saying which I like to steal. He said that the best time to have purchased real property, the number one best time to have purchased real property was 20 years ago. The number two best time to purchase real property is today, because the market is always going to go up. And so no matter what the circumstances are, all those, you see all these things on social media about how it's better to rent than to buy. And the economists typically do not agree with that concept. If you need a house, and it's always better to buy today instead of trying to gauge the market.
absolutely. We appreciate that. You put out a risk management piece recently. Of course, we're in California. We have a lot of fires in California, Northern California, all the way down here to San Diego. You did a risk management piece and sent it over to CRES. They're going to have it on their website here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But talk to a few of the items that are in your risk management piece regarding selling the lots in fire impacted areas. You have, disclosure requirements, insurance challenges, building and zoning restrictions, environmental and safety concerns, infrastructure and utility issues, buyer financing and property value volatility, community and local government regulations, and mortgage assistance. 8 really good topics. Can you touch on a few of those that you think the viewers would see value in?
Well, since we started this with disclosure being the number one, area of lawsuits, and obviously being attentive to your disclosures on a house that either is been destroyed, and obviously that seems to be a bit, I don't know what basic, there's nothing there to disclose, right? But you still have to provide the NHD reports and the fire home hardening report or disclosure, I'm sorry, and advisory. You have the wildfire advisory that was drafted after the Paradise fires, but has obviously been more important in light of what happened in the Palisades and Altadena. So just really focusing on disclosure and being very diligent is super important in these fire impacted areas. It doesn't necessarily need to be properties or you don't have to pay attention on properties that have been destroyed or partially damaged. If you got the one house that was in the middle of the carnage that survived, you're still going to want to make those disclosures. And obviously insurance was a problem before. It is going to be a bigger problem afterwards. There's been a lot of things that have been happening to try to change that. So that really is something that agents are just going to have to keep on top of, because I could say something about the insurance market today, and then someone is going to April 22, and somebody's going to read this on May 1, and it could change. There could be a different circumstance. It's just ever evolving. But CER did make a change to the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement, that made the ability to get insurance and a contingency, which before it hadn't been. So just make sure that you, as an agent, that you advise your clients, start looking about insurance early, so that you're not in a situation to where you can't close because you can't get insurance on a particular property.
A quick question on agents. Obviously, they're they're great at what they do, but some of them try to cross the line and become too much to clients. With regards to the fire and all of these 8 topics, mortgage assistant, all of that, how deep should they get with their clients? I wouldn't imagine they want to get too into the woods with them because it could come back to haunt them, correct?
There's so many changes right now in temporary orders from the governor's office, from local building departments. There's a bunch of new programs that allow a streamlined application process, and all that. Again, all that is changing daily or weekly. And you've got the environmental concerns. The federal government has actually been cleaning up most of the hazardous materials on these fire impacted sites. And so it's a long-winded answer to your question, which is you can't be on top of every issue as a real estate licensee. So you got to make sure that you're directing your clients to experts in those particular areas. If you need somebody to figure out if there's environmental clearance that needs to be done up on top of over and above what the government has already done, you need to get an expert in that field to advise your clients. Building code changes and programs. There's so many programs out there right now that range from, if you're rebuilding exactly what was there, there's a certain set of rules. If you're rebuilding up to 10%, or I'm sorry, 10% more than what was previously existed, there's different rules. If to 20%, there's different rules. And so people affected by the fires and having their home destroyed or partially destroyed, they really need to get with somebody that knows those changes, knows those programs, so that they can make the best decision for their particular situation.
Well, again, there's 8 great topics here for the viewers here to check out CRES Insurance and the risk management piece. Give us, you have 5 bullet points here on it for best practices for selling in fire impacted zones and lots there. It says work with fire mitigation experts to help buyers assess risks and necessary precautions. Talk to that.
Yeah, so that's, there's the home hardening concept is a few years old now. And so really, it's for buyers that are looking at properties that in areas where wildfires have been before and potentially are going to have fires in the future, get somebody in there that specializes in fire mitigation issues. Have a survey of the house. Is there a reason why this house survived and the others didn't? And really just try to get an understanding, because it's going to potentially impact insurance or the ability to get insurance going forward. So yeah, I would. I think it really is a best practice for an agent to refer, or at least make a recommendation to a potential buyer to have the property surveyed by somebody who knows what they're looking at with respect to fire mitigation issues.
Perfect. Best practice number 2 was to encourage early engagement with insurance providers to prevent any last minute surprises. What does that mean?
So if you have a problem with it, your house was partially destroyed or fully destroyed, right? The first thing you're going to be doing is going to your insurance company. Now, it's everybody else is too. So you want to make sure you're first in line. And again, I wrote this article a couple of weeks ago, and I would say that even the people who haven't contacted their insurers by now are already at the end of the line. I mean, it's that fast paced. But getting people on your side, whether that be a private adjusting company, which isn't always the best solution, or whether it's an attorney that specializes in coverage issues. You want to have those, at least those consultations as quickly as you can, so that you have some understanding of what kind of issues you're going to be up against, because you're going to spend a lot of money potentially on architects and engineers to develop plans that you can get approved. And if now all of a sudden you've got all this money in, and you figure out that you have an insurance problem, you're underinsured, you're never going to be able to, unless you have the cash, you're not going to be able to fund the rebuild with your the insurance available. You may have wasted a lot of money.
Well, you just talked about the planning departments. Best practice number 3 was to contact the local planning departments to understand permitting programs and rebuilding requirements. Who does that? The potential buyers or the agents?
Well, the agents are never going to want to go and try to figure out what particular permitting or rebuilding programs are available to their particular clients, right? It's, you always want as a licensee to tell your buyer, hey, there are these programs available. You need to go figure those out. Or here's in the county of LA and Altadena City. I was on a Zoom with a bunch of state people put on by Southland Regional Association of Realtors and CAR about a month ago, and it was a wealth of information. I was taking notes as fast as I could, but there are just so many programs that are available that you just have your clients go to the city, go to the county, at least get some idea of what's on the menu, because there's an awful lot.
Okay.
And another thing too,
Oh, go
again, I mentioned it a minute ago, we've got a number of executive orders from the governor's office that some were just changed earlier this week. And again, it's April 22. By May 1, those orders may be completely different. And so having your clients keep up with what those orders are is also really important.
You mentioned under best practice number 4 to highlight those fire resistant property features. I'm assuming that maybe means brushes back, maybe sprinkler systems, maybe a different roof that's fire retardant. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, if you're selling a house, that was in an area that was impacted by fires but came through unscathed, those are going to be some of the things. Well, firstly, on the home hardening, you're going to have to make those disclosures typically in any event. But those are all features of a property that it could help you market that property to buyers. Now, of course, you don't want to oversell. Hey, this house is never going to burn because of these features. You're not extending that far out. But again, you mentioned sprinklers. We've all seen, I'm sure, the news pieces of one house in the middle of the Palisades that survived, where all of them burnt down because they had a pump system to pump water out of the pool and to water down the house, which is what saved it. So those kind of things obviously are going to be important to a new buyer, and also for the buyer's ability to get insurance going forward.
And your last comment on best practices here was to be thorough, obviously, in all disclosures, but using that CAR wildfire disaster advisory when appropriate. When is that appropriate, and how should it be used?
Well, I would say if you're in a very high fire zone and you have to do the home hardening disclosure, and disclose that it's on, comes out on the NHD that you're in a very high fire zone area, I would use that form. There's a lot of good information on that on that advisory form that CER again put out after the Paradise fires. So it just gives your buyers a lot of good information where they can go do their homework. And again, it isn't a matter of, okay, here's I'm going to stick it at the bottom of all these other disclosures. You know, a lot like the wire fraud advisories. That one in the wildfire disaster advisory. You're going to want to sit down and read it to your clients or go over it, you know, line by line so that they understand and are motivated to try to go follow up on those areas.
Is it a mandatory form or not?
The wildfire disaster advisory is not mandatory.
Okay. Could there
The home hardening is one of the new, or is the newest required disclosure.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Like the TDS, if you're doing a TDS, you're going to have to do a home hardening disclosure as well.
got that. Well, all great information. I advise all viewers of this to go to the CRES Insurance website, click on California under risk management updates. You can find Mark's risk management piece on selling in fire lots and fire areas that have the lots and houses there. Great information. Mark, thank you for everything today and keeping everybody up to date on what's the pulse right now on the real estate E&O claim market, and we appreciate everything that you do for us.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on to participate in this discussion.
All right, Laura, always thanks for having us this morning so that we can help educate all of your insureds, and we're always happy to report back to you.
Great webinar, really informative, very timely. Really appreciate the time and the expertise. So for people who are watching, stand by. I'm sure we'll have more to come. And as Dave said, you can find this webinar on the CRES Insurance homepage. Just look under Claim Prevent Blog in California.